And in fact, I would advise if a trademark has been used for many years by a company that they should go out and get it registered, because it will give them that extra protection that we talked about and that extra peace of mind that we talked about before.
Welcome to the Master Your Business podcast, where we bring you the best in branding, marketing, and customer experience strategies. I'm Deirdre Martin, your host. And if you've been asking yourself how to level up your growing business, your marketing, your customer experience, or how to make more of an impact with your brand, this show is for you. You'll discover actionable tips and insights to help businesses just like yours gain clarity and illuminate the path to success. Train with industry experts, learn sales and marketing strategies, business and mindset hacks, and be inspired by authentic entrepreneurship stories. As your host, I'll share the no-nonsense advice that accelerated my journey from boring bank manager to industry thought leader in marketing and customer experience. Learn how I made the leap into the world of six-figure success, digital courses, keynote speaking, and co-authoring a #1 bestseller in just 1 year. Together with interviews from industry experts, this show ensures you're seen, heard, and hired by your ideal clients. Join our growing community of subscribers and let the Master Your Business podcast empower you to tackle your most significant challenges on your path to business success. Don't miss out. It's your turn to learn from the best and master your dream business. Today, we have a very special guest with us, Peter MacLachlan of MacLachlan and Donaldson Intellectual Property Attorneys. In today's episode, we are going to be talking about trademark secrets and understanding the basics of intellectual property. As a business owner, protecting your intellectual property is crucial to the success of your business, but it can be a complicated and confusing process. That's why we invited Peter to join us today to share his expertise on the topic. So, folks, get your pen and paper ready and stay tuned for this amazing, information-filled episode. Peter, it's fantastic to have you join me on the Master Your Business podcast. You're very welcome.
Well, thanks very much, Deirdre. It's great to be here, and I really appreciate your interest and your invitation to join you in this conversation. So, thank you.
Fantastic. Well, we're going to dive straight into the meaty bits of intellectual property. But first and foremost, Peter, what is intellectual property, and is it just for big brands and big companies, or what is it?
Okay, well, the best way I always think of describing what intellectual property is to say, firstly, that intellectual property, the reason why it's called intellectual property, firstly, is because it's not property that you can pick up, right? And that I'll that'll be clear in a second. So intellectual property, it's not material. Okay, so it's intellectual. So that's where the term comes from. And intellectual property covers a range of rights that you can acquire or have or apply for. And the three basic pieces of intellectual property are trademarks, patents, and designs. And then there's also the general term of copyright. And the best way to describe that is, let's say you invented something tomorrow. Let's say you invented the chair tomorrow, okay? Because you've invented it, the simplest thing to do would be to get a patent for it. So you get a patent for the object. The technical term is that you get a patent for its functionality, but essentially it's for the object itself. Okay. And then the next thing you would do is you would decide to put it into the marketplace and sell it. So the piece of intellectual property that comes into play there is your trademark. Most people would refer to it as your brand or your or maybe your logo, but essentially your trademark is what you sell, you use to sell your product. When you put it on out into the marketplace, it distinguishes your goods or services from those of your competitors, particularly in a situation where what you're selling or what you're providing is the same as other people's. So you're a marketing guru. So you but there are other people who also do what you do. So your brand or your trademark is what is your badge that you put on your services, maybe to distinguish you from other people who do the same thing as yourself. So that's your trademark. And then there are designs. So if you go back to the example of the chair, let's say you clearly didn't invent the chair, but you have a new look for a particular chair. So you come up with an amazing design, and it looks different, its appearance. You can get a design registration for the appearance of that. So it's your patents, your trademarks, and your designs. So they would be the three essential um, pieces known as intellectual property rights, which you can apply for through a process and get a certificate um, or a piece of paper that says, I have exclusive rights to either that trademark, or the patent is mine, or that design is exclusively mine. So they would be the three essential and most, yeah, they would be the three essential intellectual property rights. And then you also have, if you write a book, or this, and this wouldn't be our particular area, but if you write a book, or you paint a painting, or you design a website and you've got content on that website and you've written, then you have copyright in the content of those types of things. So and that the difference between that sort of intellectual property right and the others is copyright comes into being just by virtue of the fact that you've created it. So if you write the book, you automatically have copyright in that book.
Okay. That all makes loads of sense, Peter. And I think, I suppose from a business perspective, a lot of businesses, they start their companies, a lot of business owners start a company and they do create a brand, and or maybe their brand evolves over time, and some of them will have objects, or they will have the equivalent of their chair, right? And they will have something like that. Or if it's a service that they sell, that's where the trademark comes in, and and whatnot. But what I suppose I'm wondering is, Peter, when should a business take this out? Do they need to wait until they're a big brand and they're well established, or is it something that they should be doing from very early on when they start out? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think yes, it is something that you should be thinking about from the very beginning, because, and particularly, as I said, if it is a case that what you are selling or what you are providing, the service that you may be providing is not unique. Because in the vast majority of cases for new businesses, they won't be doing anything that hasn't been done before, but therefore their trademark or their brand or the badge, as I said, that they will be using, that they will be sort of using to promote or sell their business, is really, really important. And it's probably one of the first things that they should be trying to protect, because the worst thing that can happen is that you develop a really good business, and you're working away, and the business is building, and then you haven't put anything in place to protect your brand. And imitation being the best form of flattery, somebody decides, oh, that's an interesting trademark, I think I'll copy it, and you haven't got your protection in place, and then you're in a situation that you really don't really want to be in. So it's a good sort of insurance step from the very beginning, to when you come up with the brand, and you've devised your trademark, to try and put some protections in place from the very beginning, and then it almost acts like a security, and then you've got your protection for your brand in place, and then you can go out into the marketplace and promote it, and knowing that you know, it'll be harder for somebody else to copy it and take advantage of your, your unique selling point. So it's so to answer your question, it is probably something that every business when they're starting off should consider doing, and because it will, it'll protect you from or prevent you from getting into a situation, as I said, which could be very costly in the long run.
Oh my God, you've opened up a can of worms in my mind, Peter, with all the questions that I should be asking you. So I suppose the first one that I'm curious to ask is, what does having the protection, like, what are the benefits of having this protection? Like, if you could list three benefits for protecting your intellectual property, what are they?
Well, number one is okay. So having a trademark registration, one of it, it definitely one of the advantages is that it means that somebody else can't just come along and copy it, and it allows you to have a sort of the ability to try and stop them. Registration, what it does is it gives you exclusive rights to the use of your trademark in connection with the goods or services for which it's protected. So it gives you that protection. It's like an insurance policy. You hope that it's not good. You hope you're never going to have to avail of it, but it's there. So it gives you that protection and that security, and it will give you peace of mind in the sense that you know that my trademark is mine. I've got a piece of paper or a certificate or an official document which proves that it's mine. So if somebody else comes along and tries to copy it or tries to, take advantage of it, I have that protection. That's probably the main advantage of it. It's also a piece of property, so it can be bought and sold. So it does have value. So, some of the biggest companies in the world, arguably, their brands are actually the most sort of important asset they might have, because when you strip away all the actual physical things, their brand. I mean, arguably, the likes of um, Apple or Google or any of these companies, their biggest assets are their brands themselves, and they you have something to put on your balance sheet, you have an asset to put on the profit and loss account at the end, and it's got worth. It can be bought and sold, you know so it's like your premises or your house or your car, but it's a piece of property that can be exploited and taken advantage of, if you like.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. And I suppose on your balance sheet, it's potentially an intangible asset, right? Like if McDonald's were to look at their balance sheet overall, I'm guessing their intangible assets, which is their brand reputation and, their famous M logo that we see all over the world. I'm guessing that in its own right has a major value on their balance sheet. Let's say in terms of the process, because you talked about like people can go on a journey to get this protection, there's a process around it. What does that look like? How long does it take? Tell us a bit more.
Okay, well, the first thing to do on your journey to, you know, getting a trademark registered is obviously to come up with the trademark in the first place. So there's two very important points to remember when you're devising a trademark, and you go to your graphic designer to help you. The first is to make sure that nobody else has the trademark registered already. That's really important. Um, so you can do searches to make sure that there isn't any applications or registrations on the record somewhere which are too close to the mark that you're thinking of developing or protecting. Okay, so that's really important. And the second most important thing to always remember when you're devising your trademark is to try not to have a trademark which is too descriptive or connected with the actual goods or services that you are selling or providing. So, for example, if you were to try and register a trademark, which it's a bit of an extreme example, but if you tried to register the trademark excellent marketing services for marketing services, right, you wouldn't be able to get that registered because it's directly descriptive of what you do.
Mm-hmm.
So you couldn't register chocolate for chocolate, but you could register chocolate for clothing because chocolate doesn't describe clothing, but it does describe chocolate. So the first thing is to make sure that nobody else has it already. And the second one is to make sure that it is far away from being directly descriptive of your goods or services as possible. Those two points when you engage your marketing or your graphic designer, it's incredible the amount of times that people come back with marks from their designers and they say they've developed this brand for me, it's amazing, and you turn around to them and say you're not going to get that registered because it's too descriptive of what you do. So that's really important, those 2 points. If you could remember those two and act on those 2 points, you could save yourself so much hassle. Particularly the first one where you have to make sure that somebody else doesn't have the trademark registered. And I don't know much about the Kardashians, but I do know that a few years ago, one of them developed a brand of cosmetics, and they didn't check to see what was already registered, and there was a mark that was really close to theirs, and they ended up having to scrap the whole thing and rebrand, and it cost them huge amounts of money. Now, that probably wouldn't make much difference to them, but that's the kind of situation that you can avoid if you just check if your mark is registered in the territories where you're thinking of selling them or providing your services.
And how do you do that, Peter? How do you check if your mark is registered? And why I ask this is because I've had a client recently, a new client has signed up to work with me, and they registered their business name, or they registered their business name as you do with the company's registration office here in Ireland. And what happened to them was there is a global brand who has a very similar brand name to the name that this company came up with. And so where it ended up was this major global corporation reached out to this small tiny Irish company who are really only new and said, actually, you can't use that name because we have this intellectual property over here. You can't use that name. It's too closely correlated or linked or related or sounds too much like our brand name. So how can a brand, before somebody goes to the effort of creating a website and a logo and a trademark, how can they check if this is registered first?
Most national trademarks offices, so there's a trademarks office in a trademark and or patent office in most countries, right? So in Ireland, it's the Intellectual Property Office of Ireland. So if you were thinking of registering a trademark and you had a brand in mind, you can get a search done of the trademark databases in each of the countries where you are thinking of selling into, right? So you can either go through a trademark attorney who can organize your searches, or you can you can contact the Irish Trademarks Office yourself and do a search online. Now the only thing is it's not as easy as it sounds. So we would always recommend that you would engage somebody like ourselves to get the searches done because we would know what to be searching for, um, and what to look out for, and when we do the search and we get the results back, we can look at your mark and we can interpret the results we get and see what might cause you an issue or whether or not there would be any problems or whatever. So you can basically get a search done of the relevant trademark databases in the markets that you're considering. So that's the first thing. So that's the first thing to do. So a search can be done in your prospective markets or your potential markets. And even if you're thinking of, it's always good to think ahead. So if you're setting up a business in Ireland and you think that you might decide in the future to, sell into, say, the UK being next door, or possibly the US, because a lot of Irish companies, their market, they would, because of the diaspora and all that sort of thing, the US would be a big market for them. So rather than just saying, well, it's always very important to think ahead and think of where the potential, and the realistically potential markets for your products or services might be, and get a search done covering all of those places. So
Hmm.
even if right now and for the next couple of years you're only thinking of Ireland, you know, think ahead and plan ahead and cover the markets of all the markets that you're going to be, because the one thing you don't want to do is develop an amazing market in Ireland. Everything's going really well, and then you decide, oh, the US, yeah, great, and then you do a search in the US, and it turns out that there's ABC Company Limited or whatever, and they have the same, or a mark that's too close to yours, and then you're in trouble. And then you may have to have a different brand for the US, and then that gets in the way of being unified brand wise in all the places and all that sort of thing. So plan ahead is the long-winded, or the short answer to that.
Okay, that makes total sense, because I mean that is often the case, I'm guessing, where a brand starts out, they establish themselves in a market, and then they're like, okay, we've got this territory or geography covered. Now it's time to look further afield and see how we can
Yeah.
expand into new markets, which is incredibly exciting. But as you say, it could be very limiting if they haven't done their preparatory or homework first. So question around this, because you did mention getting a trademark attorney, which I know you are, and I'm not going to ask you to name your price or anything like that, but it sounds expensive, Peter. And if I'm a new business and I'm starting up, is it affordable? Like, how affordable is it to get these searches done? That's more what I'm getting at.
Well, I suppose it's like everything. You can certainly do the search yourself, right? And obviously, if you do it yourself, then it's not going to cost you anything except your time. So, but you won't have the expertise. So, but it is not, relatively speaking, and it's not that expensive. There's certainly, it's not, it's not in the sort of same league as, say, you know, when we think of legal fees, we think of, huge figures and all that kind of stuff. It's certainly not in that sort of ballpark at all. Um, and you are paying for the expertise and the confidence or the assurance that, when the search is done, it will be, it'll be interpreted in a proper manner, and you will get the information and you will get the security that comes from getting the search done and done well. So
Absolutely. Yeah, that makes total sense. It's a little bit like, I suppose, and you referred to this yourself already. It's that insurance policy. We all pay home insurance, and we pay car insurance, and we pay business, probably public liability, or different types of indemnity insurances and whatnot. So why not protect our brands, right? That's what this is. It's that protection for your brand ultimately. And so, Peter, what I'm wondering is, I would like to for the audience and people listening to hear a couple of stories, maybe if you have some up your sleeve, in terms of examples where people have been caught. Like, my clients local here in Ireland had to go and rebrand because of this big global company. So before they even got going, and they had their website, they had their logo, they had loads of marketing material, they had to go and start all over because of this global company. But can you give examples of others like that, who have maybe had challenges such as that, where they didn't do this pre work, let's call it, and really lay the foundations for their brand's protection?
yeah, I mean, we have had situations, for example, where people have come to us and they have already set up their business. They're working away. they're developing their products, and they haven't done the the sort of the advisory searches in the markets that they're going out into, and then they get the letter from, as you said, from the big company who says, sorry, your mark is too close to ours, and please stop now. And they end up having to either rebrand or pay the bigger company money to allow them to use their own brand effectively. So that kind of situation does happen now. Sometimes if you get, you can get a situation where, you get a threat from a company where they think their brand is very close to yours, and really they they nearly try the old might is right sort of approach. And we did have a case there a couple of years ago, or last year rather, where there was a couple of people, and they were setting up a restaurant in Dublin. And I'm not going to mention any names, but um, they had one branch, and they were opening up another, and everything was good. And they got a threat from big, huge company, let's say, to say that their mark was too close to ours, right? And they contacted us, and I had a look at their mark, and I had a look at the other mark, and I basically wrote to the bigger company and said, this is not, I explained why what they were saying wasn't true, and there would be no confusion, and really they should just stop and allow our client to proceed. And we never heard from them again. And now that the same people are they've just set up their second branch, and they're working away. But there was no confusion. Now there would have been no confusion rather, because the marks were not similar, but the big company was just trying to be, they put it this way: if they hadn't backed off, they had pockets probably, miles deep, and there wouldn't have been, it could have ended badly, because they wouldn't they they're so big that they would have had, so they could have just thrown money at this, and basically made my client's life very difficult, and possibly they would have had to shut down or change their brand, even though really they shouldn't have had to. But
Yeah.
luckily that didn't happen, you know.
That is lucky. Good, lucky for them, and well done you. And so, Peter, I'd like to kind of flip it as well. Has there ever been a situation where a small company has, had to approach a big brand and say, "You need to back off here. That's our intellectual property, and steer clear." How have the smaller guys succeeded from registering their intellectual property?
Well, I suppose that wouldn't happen too often, because most of the bigger companies would have done the research, and would, like, a lot of bigger companies would have, their own trademark responsible person within the company, and they would be probably aware of the checks and balances that you have to do before you start exploiting brands. And But probably in a situation where a smaller company approaches a bigger company, there's two things that are going to happen. One is that the company says, oh yeah, okay, sorry about that, and we'll back off. Or the alternative is they just say, no, I'm sorry. And then there's nothing really, it's very difficult, because if they say no, then the only, particularly if now it's different if the trade if the bigger company have registered a trade, or have applied to register a trademark, and the smaller company has a trademark already, then they have to go in, then they have to oppose the application of the bigger company, and then they have to go through a process of opposing it at the trademarks office in the particular country which is involved. So um, there are situations where a smaller company will be able to oppose a bigger company, and if it turns out that the bigger company's trademark is too close to theirs, then it should be thrown out by the trademarks office, and the bigger company has to stop, doesn't get its registration. But the difficulty there is, just because you don't get your registration doesn't mean that you have to stop using the mark, right?
Mm.
So, and then you're into the smaller company basically trying to take a court action maybe against the bigger company, and that's where the big money comes in, and that's where the big company is at an extreme advantage, primarily because they have so much money, say, and maybe they're not that interested in, they don't care about their reputation, you know. But if the bigger company has you know, might have qualms about its reputation being damaged, so that might stop them as well. So it's really, we haven't had too many of those kind of situations where it goes beyond, it goes beyond the registration process into say a court action, because as everybody knows, once you start getting courts involved and solicitors, then it just gets into silly money. So um but I suppose the advantage having your trademark registered in the first place, to go back to that, is the advantage that you do have a much stronger legal means to, say, approach the bigger company and say, stop using my mark because stop using your mark because it's too close to ours. So
Mm.
that's where, the one of the advantages of getting it registered in the first place is definitely comes into play.
Yeah, yeah. Oh my gosh, I'm really getting that message today now, Peter. If I didn't have it before, I'm really getting it today. So something else that's coming to mind is that, some listeners are probably established businesses. And I know they are because they're telling me they're in business for 20, 30 years, some of them. So if they haven't registered their intellectual property by now, is it too late? Or, I mean, do they need to lift the phone and get going on this immediately? What's the story?
Well, certainly there is no reason why a person who's been using, say, a trademark for years and years and years can't apply now to get it registered. And in fact, the fact that they've been using it for a long time, if there's an issue with the trademarks office, can actually help them get it registered. If, say, for instance, if there was a mark that's too descriptive. Do you remember before I said that you should try and avoid marks that are too descriptive of the goods? Sometimes a mark can become that's like that can be then can get registered because it has such a reputation. So you can acquire you can build up rights in a trademark if you've been using it for many years, so that it has such a reputation that it sort of counteracts the fact that it might be a bit descriptive. And
Mm.
sometimes a mark can be, you know, on the face of it be non-registrable, but can actually through years of use become registered. It's registrable, I should say. And an example of that was, if you remember, do you remember the Waterford Crystal Company?
Yes.
Right. So they've gone out of business, or they're certainly moved from Waterford. But years and years and years ago, they applied to get their trademark registered, and it was objected to on the basis that it's a it's a geographical name, right? And it just tells you where it's from. So, and that was one of the categories of things that was not registerable by the office, right? But they were able to prove that it had been used for so long that it gained a second meaning, right? So if somebody said to you now, it was proved that if somebody said Waterford, that you would as quickly say, oh, Waterford Crystal, as you would Waterford City. So it had acquired a secondary meaning. But anyways, I'm digressing a bit there. So the short answer to your question is no, it's not too late. And in fact, I would advise if a trademark has been used for many years by a company that they should go out and get it registered, because it will give them that extra protection that we talked about and that extra peace of mind that we talked about before. And in fact, yeah, yes, it is really important to go out and do it now. It will give them that security. So there is no, there's no prohibition against a trademark being registered, even if it's been used for many years.
Great. Okay. So the point is, folks, if you're listening and you haven't registered your trademarks before today, now is the time to get it done. Get going on this because, as you've heard, it could be an incredible insurance policy for your business. So, Peter, as we wrap up, what are the main 3 to 5 takeaways that you want people to really be mindful of after listening to this episode? What are your top 3 points, let's say?
Okay, well, the first one would be to have a look at your business and see what intellectual property you might have, right? And in terms of trademarks, that can be brands that you're already using, that you're thinking of developing, and a corollary of that is if you have a business and you don't have a brand yet, then go out and think about developing one. And bearing in mind my 2 points, make sure that it's not too descriptive of your business or your goods or services. And the second one is to make sure, as far as possible, that somebody else doesn't have a very similar name, and somebody else who's in the same area as you,
Mm.
right?
And
So,
actually, just as you're saying those things
yeah,
as well, one more question's coming to mind. I can't let you go without asking you this one, Peter, which is I regularly see business owners and on their marketing collateral, they use the little symbols for trademark, copyright,
yeah.
registration, and all of those things. But I have an inkling that half of those people have never registered their trademarks. Is it okay to use those if you haven't registered them, or what's your guidance around that?
Okay, so the first thing to clarify is what they are, right? So the first, so sometimes you see, and they'll generally be up in the right hand corner of the mark, say. So there might be a small TM, right? Now a TM, you can use that whether you have a trademark registered or not, because the TM just tells somebody looking at the material that this is a trademark. So that's TM stands for trademark. Or sometimes there might be, though it's not as common, there might be an SM, which is service mark, right? So there's a trademark and a trademark. A service mark used to be what they called a trademark that was for services, but generally it's a TM. So TM is for trademark, right? So you go through the process of getting registered, and that's when you can use the little or in the circle. And really, you shouldn't use that unless your trademark is actually registered. And a
Mm.
very interesting point is that in some markets around the world, it's actually a really serious offense to use that symbol when your trademark isn't registered in that country.
So that's the R in the
In the
circle.
circle.
That's that
Yeah.
one. So
Yeah.
avoid that one, folks, unless you've registered. Okay,
Yeah.
great.
And then and then the C in the circle. I'm sure everybody's seen that. That's copyright. So that just means if you produce your brochures up for the exhibition or whatever, sometimes it'll say copyright. You know your name and then the year, say, and there might be a little C in the circle. So the C in the circle, that's what that means. And the C in the circle can be, as I said, there's no register anywhere. So once you produce your brochure, put that on it, because that tells people that that the stuff, the content of your brochure or whatever it is your, it belongs to you. So I just meant to say there was 2 points about, and we've discussed a lot about trademarks, but really important for to do with patents. There's a couple of really, really important things to remember when if you go into your workshop and you're going to invent something, right? And the really important one is that if you invent something, you cannot disclose it publicly before you use it outside of your shed or lab or whatever, right? Because
Wow.
that's really so. So, and a lot of people who come up with new ideas and invent something, you can't test it in the marketplace, for example.
I did not know that, Peter. I thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to design this fabulous new cup here and I'm going to get people to drink it and see what they think. But before I paid to get it patented. But you're saying patent it first and then test it in the market.
Or at least start the process of getting a patent, because one thing is, once you apply for a patent, then you can start going out and looking for funding or testing it in the marketplace or whatever. But that's really important, right? And
Mm.
that's, I've had people come to me and say, I've invented this and it's great, and they've said, oh yeah, it's great, I sold x amount of them down wherever, and they won't get a patent.
Wow.
That's really important. And the other thing I was going to say was, a lot of people think that if you have your name registered on the company's register, the company, the register of company names, that gives you trademark protection. It doesn't. So that's really important as well. So those 2 points would be really important.
Thanks, Peter. Oh my gosh, they're great. And what useful information that business owners need to be mindful of for really putting in place some security around protecting what it is that they've created. So, Peter, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm going to share all the details about where people can find you if they want to talk more about trademarks and registering their intellectual property in the show notes and in the links below. Is there anything, Peter, that you'd like to add before we finish up?
No, I think as I said, I could almost say 100% of businesses who are of any shape or size probably have some piece of intellectual property, or certainly some potential piece of intellectual property that they could protect, and get registration for. So it's almost like a mindset that you could get into. If you're going to start up a business, what's my brand? How can I get it protected? Yeah, and go from there, really.
That makes total sense. And in a previous episode that I've recorded, I don't know if it's live yet, but in one that I've recorded with a fantastic gentleman in the US, he talks about franchising, and we had a whole conversation about franchising your business. So your patents in there and your trademarks are going to be so important for, if that's something that you plan to do. So super, Peter. Thank you again. It's been amazing having you on the show. Thank you so much.
Well, Deirdre, it's been an absolute pleasure, and thank you so much for inviting me. It's great. Thank you.